Question 4a. Mention 5 reasons why the prophetic messages were written. So the reason why prophetic messages were written, number 1, is that as evidence to justify God's action taken against the people. So in basic terms, you can call it as evidence. Those who had not heard the prophet to know the will of God. You know, there were different prophetic messages. So if these people did not hear what the prophets were saying, and thus they were written so that they can be able to know what God willed during that time. Written message express God's will in human language. It basically showed what God wanted for the people in human language. That is, written message express God's will expressed in human language. Some prophecies took time to be fulfilled. So the writing helped the people to know God's will be done in His own time. So some of the prophecies, they took a lot of time to be fulfilled. So when they were written, it helped the people to know some of them were not fulfilled, but they were fulfilled in what? In their own time. And writing messages was a permanent record of God's message. So here, the main point is permanent record. Question 4b. Explain the teachings of Amos on the hypocritical religion in Israel. And I think this one was in another exam. A lot of importance was placed on external observance of religion rites. So you see a lot of emphasis on external observance of religion or religious rites. So people, true worship of God was not demanded on living according to God's law. So many people were externally observing religious rites, but not in being involved in true worship. Tithe given came from what? Stolen land. Came from produce of stolen land. So that was the hypocritical religion. Or this is what you normally write as empty what? Sacrifices. You can just say it's that. They are called and offerings. And this you can find in Amos chapter 4, verse 4 to 5. Also, people began worshipping other gods. That is, they abandoned Yahweh. So indeed, that is what you call idolatry. Offerings made did not reflect holy lives. That is, they were making offerings, but their behavior showed that they were moving away from Yahweh. So these offerings that they made did not reflect holy lives. Worshippers went to holy places to satisfy their own desires. That is called what? Temple prostitution. And lastly, worshippers were making offerings as a show-off. Question 4c. How do modern Christians demonstrate obedience to God? So how can you as a Christian show obedience, that you are obeying God? These are the same, accepting God's call to serve Him in any capacity. Using their wealth to serve God or the needy, orphans and widows. Facing opposition in their work without giving up. So that is what Christians should do. Face opposition in their work without giving up. Ready to serve God, even if they are not religious people. Leading holy lives. This is where we say obeying the 10 Commandments. Proclaiming God's message despite the consequences. That is evangelization regardless of the consequences. Respect for teachings of God to avoid judgment and punishment. And lastly, you face opposition, or they face opposition in their work without giving up. Remember, we're talking about Christians. Face opposition in their work without giving up. Question 5a. Identify 6 difficulties the Israelites faced in observing their religion while in exile. What were the difficulties that they experienced? They could not offer sacrifices because there was no temple, or the Jerusalem temple was not there. Number 2, there is low morale. The morale of the exiled Israelites was very low because their temple and city had been destroyed. They could not observe all the religious practices because they felt that Babylon was unclean land. So here is about religious practices. They could not observe all of them because they believed that Babylon was unclean land. So, victories of the Babylonians and security of their rule showed that their god Marduk was more powerful than their god Yahweh. So, the victory of the Babylonians, remember that they won the what? When they fought, yes? And they were able to take the Israelites to what? To their land, Babylon, yes? This showed that they were what? Their gods were more powerful than who? Than Yahweh. That's why it was hard for them to worship. It was difficult for them to observe religion when they were there. So, these victories of the Babylonians showed that their god Marduk was more powerful than God Yahweh. Many did not believe that God still cared for them. The youth lost hope because most of them also saw their parents had done what? And lost hope. So most of the youth also lost hope. Question 5b. In what ways did King Josiah attempt to restore the worship of Yahweh in Israel during the days of Jeremiah? So, ways King Josiah attempted to restore worship of what? Of Yahweh. What did he do first? He killed all the priests associated with idol worship. He put back the Ark of the Covenant in its place. He repaired the temple of Jerusalem. And why was he doing that? To make it presentable and worthy for use for worship. So repairing the temple, reinstating the Passover celebrations as a sign of returning to God. He destroyed all the idols and altars that were associated with idolatry in Israel. He removed all idols and other objects of false worship from the temple of Jerusalem. And lastly, he held a religious ceremony in which he made the Israelites to rededicate their lives to the covenant way of life. So he had this religious ceremony, and in that ceremony, the Israelites were supposed to rededicate their lives to God. Question 5C. How do Christians observe their days of worship in Kenya today? So basically, you are being asked, what do you do on Sundays or Saturdays? So for those who are seventh days, during your day of worship, what are you supposed to do, or what do you do? Preaching to others, resting from routine work, solving family problems, repenting their sins, offering guidance and counseling services, listening to preaching, going to church, visiting the sick, attending fellowship, participating in singing for the Lord, and giving church contributions. Question 6A. Give 7 reasons why observance of blood kinship is important in traditional African communities. So when you observe blood kinship, whereby in blood kinship you should not marry from the same kin, right? Like those ones. Why do we observe them? What are the reasons? Why the importance of observing blood kinship? Number 1, it helps the members to face challenges together. Basically, this is for moral support. Prevents the spread of hereditary diseases. Helps maintain culture of the people. For example, religion, customs, traditional beliefs, and marriage. It provides a wide source of material help in case of need. You know, blood kinship has a lot of people, so in case you're in need, you can be able to source what? Material help. Provides a wide source of security to members. So in basic terms, this is a source of security. Serves as a check on one's behavior or discipline. And lastly, it promotes harmonious living as related to people respect each other. blood kinship, you're supposed to respect each other. So this basically promotes harmonious living. Question 6b. What factors have affected traditional African education system? Education system whereby the girls were supposed to be educated by the grandparents, right? What has affected that traditional education system? Number one, there is the introduction of modern technology. Money, culture, or economy. Western culture or westernization. Introduction to Western education system. The system that we are doing is from the West. So introduction of it affected the traditional African educating system. Growth of urban centers, or what we call urbanization. The coming of Christian missionaries also affected the traditional African education system. And lastly, establishment of colonial rule, or establishment of the new system of government. The last question, question 6c, how was mutual responsibility and harmony promoted in traditional African communities? So, if you're told that, how was harmony promoted? Harmonious living, how was it promoted in the traditional African communities? There was proper guidelines on how to dispose wealth, how to use it and how to dispose wealth. So those guidelines were there. There was communal ownership of land. There was also communal worship. The community had methods of defending the members against external attacks. Extended families ensured that all members of the community were provided for. Role of each member was spelled out clearly. That is, the role of each member was clearly known. People were educated on their responsibilities, or they were educated on their obligation. And then there were rules and taboos. There were rules and taboos to regulate behavior. All members took part in the rites of passage. There was sharing of resources among members. And lastly, people participated in communal work. And that is the end of paper 1.